Hello, all you wonderful humans, and welcome to episode 27 of The Nonprofits, recorded on June 30th, 2021, and premiering Sunday, July 4th. Happy 4th, everyone. So this show is a product of the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and the promotion of positive atheism. So we have a great panel here today with Jim Barrows, Jena Miyu, and our very special guest, Autumn, from the YouTube channel Notes from Autumn. Hello, everyone.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
So we have, like I said, a great lineup. We'll be talking about guns and the church and Moonies, racial, excuse me. Yes, let me try that over. We'll be talking about guns and the Church of the Moonies, unearthing the grim truth about Canada's residential schools, the religious test for public office, and the lemon test, a little looking back on church-state separation. So with that, Autumn, thank you for joining us as a special guest. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am Autumn of the YouTube channel Notes from Autumn. I run a tiny channel, TikTok account, Twitter, all of the same handle, where I basically do a lot of evangelical content, like deconstruction of Christianity, responding to things that are happening in in America because of religion mostly, but yeah, just kind of a mix of things, but viewing it through the lens of psychology, sociology, and biology, just using science to explain behavior and why people believe and act the way they do.
Oh, wonderful.
Fascinating.
Cool. And speaking of, our first article here, we'll be talking about, like I said, guns and church and the worship with AR-15 rifles. Autumn, you were going to lead us in with that?
Yeah. So Vice published an article on how generational indoctrination basically has led to Trump conspiracies and this new religious movement branched off of the Unification Church, now called the Sanctuary Church. And they have assembled on this compound, and they're basically worshiping AR-15s, and they believe that the deep state will incite a war against Christians, gun owners, and are convinced to seek refuge on this 40-acre compound in Central Texas.
Great.
Wow.
Waco, no less.
Waco.
Yeah.
Right,
Waco,
exactly. So.
Yeah, so it was very surprising to me when I heard that this was coming from the children of the Moonies, Reverend Moon, the guy that did 30,000 couple weddings back in the 90s. And this is a continuation of that church?
Yes. Actually, if anyone's ever taken an interest in cult mentality, the book Combating Cult Mind Control talks a lot about the Unification Church and the Moonies, because the author of the book left that particular cult and so uses that like his experience as an example of like cult mentality and what it's like to leave a cult. But basically it's a South Korean cult that started, I think, like in the 1950s. It was a while back. And then this is his son now that's started his own cult with a new name, kind of like a rebranding, maybe. I don't know. But it makes sense because new religious movements often occur when like a charismatic authority offers an illusion of safety during like trying times. So I was just thinking with the pandemic, with the like heightened political like tensions, basically social turbulence makes people go to cults such as QAnon, you know, and cults like this, where it's like we need to seek protection because we feel unsafe because of all these political tensions, and we need to feel like we're in the know. And then charismatic leaders will make cult members feel like they're in the know, and that, you know, they're offering this safety from all this turbulence going on in society, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a very interesting takeaway as far as the naming of the ministry that this the son of the senior Mooney has named it. He has coined it Rod of Iron Ministries. And per the article, it does reference that he pulled this from the interpretation of the book of Revelations. And I actually looked it up itself. He references Revelations chapter 2, verse 27. And it basically reads, "And he shall rule with them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a plotter shall they be broken to shivers." Basically meaning that the Lord thy God will come down and rule over the sinful with a rod of iron, or wherever that rod of iron may be. And per this cultist interpretation, their rod of iron happens to be guns. So they, ironically and semi, scarily. Interestingly enough, with this junior Mooney, I'll just go ahead and call him that. I know his name is actually Pastor Sean, but he has this partnership with a brother, Justin Mooney, who owns a business, a gun ownership business known as the Car Arms. So he's solely just a businessman. And from the information that I dug up and kind of researching the background from the father to the son and the brother, is that this brother has consistently held this business since mid-90s. And it's not something that's just recently developed. It's slowly, since maybe early 2000s, has been a development with this kind of cult, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
What seems so dangerous about this to me, like obviously cults are never a good thing, but what seems so dangerous about this particular cult and this particular story to me is that you have these people that have been led to believe that there's internationalist Marxist globalists that are going to incite a civil war against gun owners or Christians, the people that they are, and they have guns. So they have, I would say, not a great epistemology for coming to their conclusions. So how are they supposed to have a good epistemology for knowing when they're actually being attacked? Like, this seems like a recipe for like a repeat of when we had people committing mass suicide drinking Kool-Aids in the Jonestown. Is it Jonestown cult?
Yes.
It seems like they're preparing for violence, and they don't have a good way of determining when they need to use that violence because they've been led to believe all of these things that are untrue. And so to me, I feel like it's a disaster waiting to happen because you have all these people with access to deadly weapons and bad epistemology.
Right.
Jim, you're muted.
Oh, I don't think I can hear Jim, but I know just to piggyback off that, I wanted to reference actually the Pastor Sean mentioning that, of course, he has fellowship, not necessarily fellowship, but he follows and was in favor of our previous president. And in an interview, he had referenced that he is determined to take up arms solely to defeat the political Satanism. And I took that as meaning, defeating the secular world with, Holy Scripture and things like that. And so I wonder how much of, that type of language solely has to do with, their faith, or is it just a type of business venture in order to put themselves on a type of political and overarching business pedestal?
Yeah, I did notice that that Sean's brother, you said it was Jason?
Correct. Justin.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Justin. He did finance the purchase and the rehabilitation of this 40-acre compound, or somewhat. I believe that was
Correct.
in the article as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, they are definitely kind of an end of days cult. I mean, I'm happy that YouTube booted them for obvious reasons, but no, they are still having sermons weekly on Twitch, and I think there was another platform that he was spouting his rhetoric on. But we have quotes like, "We are in the death of America right now," and that's why, of course, God is allowing this expansion, our expansion. So it's some of the so I don't know. I don't know what to think about these guys.
I mean, I gain two different perspectives as it does appear that obviously they're leading into this, utilizing an extreme indoctrination of their followers, and it has been going on for many years. So, of course, obviously, we recognize that cultist behavior is very intoxicating. And as Autumn had referenced at the top of the intro here, that it's very manipulative and easy for those that are feeling lost or have this unrelatable fear or conspiracy of a fear of the world changing or the political atmosphere changing, and a lot of this kind of rushed up all over, just pertaining to the former president. But I also have noticed that there is a lot of business venture just in connection and pertaining to Senior Mooney. Once I kind of dug a little deeper, and I was just astounded the kind of political business connections the Senior Mooney had created. For instance, I had dug up that the Senior Mooney had founded the News World Communications in 1976. And it's like an international news business company, which to this day owns one is actually very prominent conservative news outlet, Inside of the News, and the other one is actually the Washington Times. And technically, the current owners of the Washington Times is noted as Operations Holdings, but they are actually a subsidiary of the Unification Movement, i.e. the News Media International, i.e. the very corporation that Senior Mooney had started. So just having that being easily discovered is curious to me, as far as I don't believe this is just purely driving a cultist ideology. It also is in combination with some type of overarching business venture. And that's even more profound and scary, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the 70s, and I remember the Moonies as the crazies in long robes standing around in airports.
Wow.
And being pacifist almost to a fault. And then along comes the sun, and now they've got guns and they're going nuts this direction, trying to get this self-fulfilled prophecy going of we're going to do things that because we think they're right, and that's going to piss off the government, and then the government will come after us. And that is exactly the pattern that Reverend Jim Jones did, and David Koresh did with the Branch Davidians.
You're right.
You will, I mean, if you don't pay your taxes, and if you buy guns of the wrong length, and you do these things because you think you're okay by God, then yeah, eventually the FBI is going to come knocking, or the DEA is going to come knocking on your door and go, hey, you need to stop doing this. And so that's kind of it's an interesting progression from a reputation of being hardcore peaceniks to now they're worshiping with guns. And it's just, it makes you wonder how they get to that point to go from one extreme to the other. And the article even mentioned, that several people had left because they're like, this isn't the Moonies we know. But yeah, all that stuff gets.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. I have a little bit of a delay. Yeah, whenever there's culture, born from culture is counterculture. So, like, if you've ever seen lowrider trucks, it's because of, white guys, hicks maybe, in the South making their trucks very tall. So you have rebellion often that comes out of culture. So I I'm not so surprised that there's a cult that branched off that went a completely different direction, just like you see it all the time in Christianity, where new denominations will break off because of someone's ideas. But, this could be like, because it's his son, this could be like rebellion against his father.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to do this my own way and kind of counter those ideas with my own.
But it seems like it's that the senior Mooney has given his blessing to this, right? Which is
Senior
odd,
Mooney has died.
Oh, okay. Then, yeah.
Yeah, that was in early 2000s.
Okay, I thought I had read that someone, the original organization had given this, their blessing to these folks, but
That
so
could
it was
be
a peaceful rebellion, if not, if anything, right? So yeah,
Certainly, sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and yeah, and definitely there was some. The article definitely had some conversations with people who had left the. I apologize. The first church, that would be not the Rods of God, but the Church of
Unification Church. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Unification Church, and they were talking about what they were seeing in Sean's, or King Moon, as he likes to have him be called, like he likes to be called. And he was saying, so yeah, some of these people are saying things like, someone who liked to remain anonymous, going by Jane, I feel like I'm watching a school shooting or something in slow motion. These people are just getting crazier and crazier, and it's scaring everyone. I don't know what's going to happen next. So,
yeah. And I mean, now we have a slightly different political situation here in Texas than we did with Waco. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with a cult that supports Trump and a governor that supports Trump in a potential legal clash, and to see what, with the federal government. So there's potential for some real craziness to ensue, just given our political situation here in Texas.
I agree. And I can honestly say that this doesn't seem too far removed from what we know of QAnon. It's just in this case, it's just a overly zealous religious following cultists and over cultist leadership, just perpetuating just adding their faith and involving their members to weaponize themselves and deepening their belief in conspiracy theories and into whatever additional ideals and theories into their belief that they follow. I quite honestly, I can't even peg. I mean, it did reference that the family at one point converted or recognized themselves in the early days of the senior Mooney as Christian, but I can't even peg and identify any type of book that they follow, or maybe I just had to dig a little deeper, and maybe it just simply is the Bible. But it just seems just far more extreme, and in addition to the business venture side of it all as well.
Yeah.
What do you guys think are our options for cult deprogramming in order to prevent some sort of crisis or violence, I should say?
I'm so glad you asked that, because that was something I was looking into and just reflecting myself, actually. And just as Malty had referenced, the individuals mentioned in the article that wanted to remain anonymous, pretty much one in particular was a young woman whose parents is very heavily involved. So much so that they moved themselves from their original homestead to, I believe, Pennsylvania is where the original location of the sanctuary church is, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, were people that never held guns in their life before, and all of a sudden bought guns. So her transition of just basically, she cut herself off completely from her parents. But obviously that was a process for her because of the trauma and what she had saw and what she knew, and the potential chance of her life being harmed if her parents ever found her, or if any member of that church ever found her. So it does seem that, initially a person that's involved into and persuaded into this cult is, love bombed, is like the kind of Christian technical term that you can put it, is they're driven to be so involved in the love and participating in, a community where they feel like they matter. And then all of a sudden they just get so deep and entrenched in it. Then like, yeah, this makes sense. I'm going to take up arms. And then to deconvert yourself out of that, you've been so grounded in these rose colored glasses for so long, it may take even double that time to desensitize yourself from all of that and heavy indoctrination and heavy extreme cultist behavior. So I can only imagine the length of time it would take someone, the therapy, the just, getting yourself out of not being isolated in your element and feeling that you can live a normal life, I guess you could say. It took years, I'm sure.
Yeah. One of the things that I was happy to hear is that they are starting to be deplatformed some. So YouTube has deplatformed them. So now they are only running on Twitch and Mumble, I think. So that's helpful to try to contain the infection. It scares me that of 40, this compound is being made ready, I guess, for it sounds like they have it's pretty much it's a whole town.
Yeah, it's 40 acres of land.
Yeah, it used to be some kind of a resort or
or RV park.
RV park.
It's still an RV park. They just renovated it and upgraded the spaces, but you can still have a bunch of RVs. So it's not being fortified, but I mean, that would probably be the next step, right? Get some solid fences put up some guard towers. But yeah, hopefully they run afoul of the law a little bit sooner than that.
Well, or that it is more of I don't know, money making venture, but I mean, just because if that is the idea that's coming from the leadership, that doesn't mean that's the ideas that is being held by the congregation.
Right. Yeah. True.
Well, the congregation believes whatever they're told, and that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I, if I can add just one thing, I think it's very important to understand that not all cultist followers are bad. They are victim of circumstance. And unfortunately, that victimization poses them in a way that they just fall just way too deep because they've initially have, from whatever past life that they have, naturally have lost some type of comfort, love, support, family, whatever it may be, that suddenly put them in, I guess you could say, the wrong place in the wrong time, and got themselves involved in a situation where they genuinely for themselves felt love and support and a family and a community, just as, as non-believers sought out for ourselves. If we have previously, I know I can speak for myself, just deconverting and finding a community of my own. So it can weigh on a person and tug at your heartstrings, I guess you could more or less say, when someone has those insecurities and gets themselves attached to that. So I think, honestly, having that understanding, I can actually think of a friend myself that came out of a cult, just having that understanding that initially these people are good people. They're just falling into a belief that's just totally wrong.
Yeah, well, these cults don't prey on the strong, right? They prey on the vulnerable. Exactly. And when they are at their most vulnerable. So, and it's just one step after another, and it's a slow decline.
Yeah. It sounds like we're pretty much through with that. Autumn, anything else that you'd like to add before we move on to the next subject?
Nope. I just hope we find a solution for deprogramming soon.
Yeah. I agree. I think we all can agree on that.
Certainly.
So this is the part of the show where I get to tell you that if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this channel and click the like button below. So the notification bell, turn on that notification bell so you'll always know when the Nonprofits is going to be on. That is Sundays at 3 p.m. Central, by the way. So to let you know, on our count, we are now at 8.48 thousand subscribers. Looking
Wow.
towards that 10,000. Once we
Doing
hit
good, guys.
10,000, once we hit that 10,000, we can do fundraisers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Tell your neighbor, tell your postman or woman or person or that person you hate down the street or the person at the store, everybody and anybody, have them come join us on the nonprofits. So we can also join our family of social media outlets. You can find most of the nonprofits hosts at the atheist community of Discord. Jena and I are there frequently, and I hope Jim, and I know I've seen Jim there on quite a few occasions. Yeah, and of course, Autumn, you're welcome to join us there. I'm going to try to be there for this premiere and be chatting in the text chat. You can also join us. That would be the ACA Discord at tiny.cc/ACD Discord. You can subscribe to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts if you want to listen to instead of watch us. That way you can get the nonprofits, the Atheist Experience, Truth Wanted, and all other ACA shows. You can, that way you will not miss a single episode. And then the only last one to mention would be Facebook. That would be facebook.com/groups/nonprofits and facebook.com/groups.nonprofits for our Facebook group. Thanks everybody for your support. And now we get to talk about our next segment. And if you thought the last one was fun, unfortunately,
It's heavy.
Yeah, this one's really heavy. I'm sad that we don't have a Canadian here to give Canadian perspective on this, but I also feel that this is something that is going to be continuing on for a while, and it's also something that is poignant, and I didn't want it to get stale, so that's why I put it in the rotation. This would be, well, let me give you a little bit of timeline. Last month, that would be the beginning of middle of May, 200 and let me get the number here completely right. 251, 215 unmarked graves were found in British Columbia. That would be in the Kamloops residential school. So this month, and this was already in the works, that they were going to go back to these schools because of stories they had heard from Native or First Nation peoples that had gone to these schools of some of the horrid things. They were planning on doing this ground penetrating radar type looking for mass graves at a residential school in Saskatchewan. But because they did find the 250 in British Columbia, that kind of pushed the urgency up. And now 751 unmarked graves have been found around that school grounds.
Oh, wow.
These are single unmarked graves. These are not mass graves. So yeah, and these are all First Nation schools. These are schools that were where children were taken away from their parents. We could only see them once a week, maybe once a month. We're told that they could not speak their native tongue, were taught English, and were converted to Catholicism. So yeah, that's what we're talking about. And as a little bit of a side note, I just heard today there has been 5 now in the past week Catholic churches that have burnt. 4 of them have been in Canadian Native American land. The 5th one was in town, not on reservation. Boy,
Yeah,
I don't know.
This is something that happened in the United States as well. and not just the Catholic Church, but the Protestant churches as well. And I mean, Phoenix, Arizona has a street called Indian School Road, named because there was an Indian school there. And so these atrocities happened here in the States. The only difference is that we don't have a commission like Canada does to try and go and right some of these wrongs as best you can so far after the events. But you know, this is nothing new. Unfortunately, this is the way that religion says the soul is more important than the body, and so this type of activity is justified. And cultural genocide is definitely a good term for what they're attempting to do. You know, rip kids from their homes and then re-educate them, and then send them back, and as completely different people, as good little Christians or good little Catholics, and it's just horrifying to think that once you have this belief that the soul, something we can't even prove exists, is more important than the body, that justifies all kinds of horrible things happening, and justifies all kinds of maltreatment, and that's exactly what happened. So I'm glad that Canada is attempting to do something about it, and I think that if the United States ever does, then it will get worse. But one Catholic church has definitely been vandalized. So the 5 that were burned, and then one pretty heavily vandalized, which is not a surprise. So,
yeah,
Jena?
just to.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, please, Autumn.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of echo what Jim's saying here, because I feel like from a Christian standpoint, it's like, yes, if what they believe is true, then the soul is more important than this life and the body. The problem is that it's not true. So they're sacrificing their humanity for the sake of this ideology and using it against kids, where they're stripping kids of their culture, their language, their thoughts, past tense, they stripped kids of their culture, their language, and their thoughts, all for this idea that took hold of them. Like, just reading this article again, I was reminded of how maddening this can be, where it's like you have on one end love bombing, this creator that loves you, and on the other end extortion, that if you don't accept that love and do what you're supposed to do, then you're going to be punished. And apparently, like with this situation, not just punished in this hypothetical afterlife, but punished and abused in this reality. And it's really sad. It's really awful to read about.
Yeah, it's incredibly so, for lack of any other term, forced religious assimilation. And one thing that really stood out to me amongst many quotes within the article was in reference to this elderly woman who made it plain that the obvious scars that these First Nations people have experienced some from the past is obvious and is relevant, or that scar is seen in most Indigenous people in that region today, in reference to heavy addictions to alcohol. It's basically on a rise at epidemic levels on reservations. An interesting quote was from her. Her name was Florence Threaver. A lot of the pain that we see in our people right now comes from then. They made us believe we didn't have souls. The stripping of the culture, the stripping of their native tongue, their language, their way of life, just totally flipped, torn away from them. And those that did not follow it, either I guess rebelliously or not the right way, were unfortunately their lives were taken horridly.
Yeah. And in some cases, it probably wasn't, it was probably through starvation and abuse,
right?
Which does not help anything. This.
Yeah. So I saw that there was 150,000 children that went through the Native American, Native Peoples Reeducation internment schools, residential schools, excuse me. And yeah, so and to your point, Jim, of if it ever comes to the United States, I've linked a sub article here from the Religious News Service. American Church needs to reckon with its legacy of Indigenous boarding schools, where they're talking about how our I apologize, that there will be a commission started to find out what happened in these schools in the United States as well.
Okay.
So yeah, but that's, I mean, there is more to it than that. I mean, I'm reading here, and if I may quote, Johnny's going to kill me. He doesn't like quoting, but this one is important. This is from our friend Rick Santorum. He was on CNN.
Boy.
We birthed a nation from nothing. I mean, there was nothing here. I mean, yeah, we had Native Americans, but candidly, there isn't much Native American culture in Native America.
Wow.
Yeah, Indigenous.
Yeah.
So this is the Religious News Service. Their response: Indigenous journalists, writers, and activists demand Santorum's removal from CNN, which eventually happened as a result of those relentless efforts.
Good.
They're trying to back up this guy. I mean, it's just it's infuriating.
The key was that he was eventually removed after so many people harped about it. CNN didn't remove him on their own after he said what he said. They didn't cut that scene after it was already broadcast. They removed it because too many people got mad.
Yep. Exactly. And Autumn, do you have anything to add?
Not at the moment. Thank you, though.
So it was Secretary Haaland who was the federal announces a federal Indian board school initiative. So that is the person who had brought that to get that going.
I do have a question, if I may, for all of you. Really, basically, it's not too far lost that we have come off just in the last couple of weeks of Juneteenth and it being recognized as a federal holiday. And a lot of that lead up, I guess you could say, was due to many people finding out, like, oh, there was, the Tulsa massacre. Not a lot of people knew that. For myself, I only just discovered that later in my adult life, so just roughly maybe a few years ago. So it's not surprising that this was kind of like a thing that happened and swept under the rug. And similar to what has occurred in Canada in their colonial past, a thing that occurred that more or less was swept under the rug. Fortunately, Canada has that commission and moving forward. And I think, Malty, you had a reference that the U.S. or a particular state, correct me if I'm misphrasing, but they're potentially starting a commission to do a similar thing. Am I misspoken or roughly?
No, that is correct.
Okay, and so based on that, I'm curious. Very simple question. Do we believe that will really happen? And will that really be a thing? I have my doubts. I'm very skeptical, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I think it depends, on the political will that we have. And I don't know that anybody has the political will to open up this can of worms. But then you have the political will of the Native Americans here in the United States. We can't discount that either, and their ability to bring to bear public ire. I think that's one of the reasons that we finally got Juneteenth recognized. There was enough recognition that this needed to be recognized as something. I would like, and the Tulsa Massacre as well. It took the Watchmen to,
Yeah. A TV show.
To put it into your perspective, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, there's no way this happened and I didn't know about it, and it wasn't taught in history. And yet, yeah, it has been completely, um, covered up. I kind of knew sort of that, the Civil War was the end of the Civil War wasn't the end of slavery in the United States. It took a little time to force the issue, but I didn't know that Galveston and Juneteenth were significant to that.
Right.
So I've always considered myself luckily to be somewhat better educated in that respect to some things, but yeah. And now that this has come out, we've seen multiple articles. I've seen multiple articles floating around. So the public ire is getting there. I don't think that very many people realize this is not a Canadian problem, that this is a Catholic problem. Everywhere the Catholics went, they did this in the Americas. And the Protestants did it as well. This was a Christian thing they did. And it's not just the Native Americans either. The treating of orphans has always been, Little Orphan Annie is not that far off. I don't think the death count is going to be anywhere near as high. But, orphans were seen as inherently evil because they were born to sinful parents. But yeah, there's some reckoning coming. I hope it comes for the Native Americans in the United States, and that we are doing some small part here by talking about it and raising this a little bit.
To fill in a little bit more. Oh, yes, please.
To speak to something similar, I was going to say, last year it took the atrocity with the murder of George Floyd for me to look to a Black historian to learn about Black history, because until that point, my entire education, the Black history that I got was completely whitewashed and just tone deaf and toned down. And so just kind of to speak to what Jim was saying earlier, I think it's like it will, like, unfortunately, it will have to take like people raising their voices and protests, similar to like what we saw with the Black Lives Matter, for people to realize how much has been swept under the rug and how much injustice there still is. And also, to further echo Jim, like when you look into Black history from a Black historian, you find out about all the ways that Christianity in the Bible was used to advocate for slavery and to manipulate people into slavery. And I had never, I always thought that there were bad Christians that had owned slaves, but it's like, this is very, very similar to that, where it's like Christian ideology used to be racist against people, and I think it's because of that narcissistic element in the Bible of like, we have all the knowledge, don't doubt this, and you pass that off to people who already have power, and they're going to use it to manipulate the vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you add into that the idea that you are completely right, that God won't judge you for bringing more souls to Him. Just a cascading snowball of bad stuff, of evil, once you start down that path.
Yeah. So to fill in a little bit more about what might be going on here in the U.S., I'm taking this from the U.S. Department of the Interior press release from Secretary Haaland. Her name is Deborah Haaland, and she is the Secretary of Interior for the United States. And she was speaking at the 2021 mid-year conference for American Indians. She had stated, the Interior Department will address the intergenerational impact of Indian boarding schools to shed light on their unspoken traumas of the past, no matter how hard it will be. I know this process will be long and difficult. I know this process will be painful. I won't undo the heartbreak and loss that we feel. Oh, by the way, our Secretary of the Interior currently is Native American.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's significant. It's I believe it is the first time that's ever happened, and the Department of the Interior is the one who deals with Native Americans and the tribes extensively. So that is not a small thing to have happen, and that's a huge. I don't know, being from Arizona, I don't think I can actually tell you how important that is, I think, to the Native Americans and the tribes to have someone who knows what they're going through intimately, because there's just so much going on the reservations. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, this will be the Federal Indian Board School Initiative that
good.
she is spearheading.
Yay.
Yay.
Good. Good. It's a
Good.
good thing.
It is a good thing. It is a good thing. So, that being said, I know, and we try to bring you guys things that are important. You may not see, or try to dig deep into some things that you may not have time to. So, because of that, we just want to continue to do so. So, if you can support us in any way, that would be great. You could become a Patreon at nonprofits patreon.com/the nonprofits. You can support the ACA by shopping at smile.amazon.com and selecting the atheist community of Austin as your beneficiary. And if you already find, that is if you're finding yourself shopping at Amazon. So you please share the link, get us to 10,000 subscribers so we can start running the fundraisers for our show.
Yes, and do more good.
And do more good. So we're to be talking about next, I think Jim's going to lead us in on this, talking about one of our ACA intimates, I think. Andrew Seidel?
Yeah, a good friend of the ACA and a lawyer for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, a constitutional lawyer, and is extremely good. He's got a really good book out. Someone help me. I'm having a senior moment on the name.
Andrew's book?
Yeah, Andrew's book, The Founding Myth.
The Founding
Yes.
Myth.
Yes. But he is, this article he wrote as an opinion piece for the Tennessean about some rather interesting things going on in the Tennessee legislature. So currently in the Tennessee legislature, if you are a preacher of any kind or an atheist, you cannot hold office. And the reasoning on the preacher was that since all your time should be taken up serving God, you have no time to serve the public. And an atheist, well, the usual, right? So now they want to go ahead and change that and allow preachers to become elected officials in Tennessee. And that is fine, but they're going to leave the ban against atheists. And so they need to do both, right? And let atheists also be elected officials, officially or legally elected officials. But and as Andrew points out, that the lawyer doing this, who is State Senator Mark Pody's proposal is to do this, that he's simply appealing to his base. And well, the nuns are growing, the atheists are growing, and leaps and bounds, even in Tennessee, with church membership plummeting, below 50% for the first time in according to a Gallup poll in the Gallup's 80-year history. So that's fairly impressive. And that exodus continues even in Tennessee, one of the belt buckles of the Bible Belt. But I kind of hate to disagree with a lawyer of Andrew's stature, but I think they should keep the ban on preachers of any stripe just because we just have this thing called separation of church and state. Don't think a preacher should be an elected official with that. But I'm okay with them doing it as long as atheists can also legally become elected officials. And there are a number of states that have this similar laws, and some of them just ignore it, and some don't.
Yeah, I think there's a total of 7 states that have laws that ban atheists from holding office. None of them are enforceable due to federal statutes. But yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely obstacles that are put into non-believers' ways. So yeah, so they want to remove Section 1 from Article 9 of the Tennessee Constitution, while leaving Section 2, which no person who denies the being of God or a future state of rewards and punishment shall hold any office. That they want to keep. And they also want to keep the ones as dualists, or those that help dualists can hold office. So,
well,
I mean, that one I'm okay with,
thing.
because yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have any duels anyway these days.
That phraseology of a belief in future punishment and rewards is wouldn't that be if I break the law, go to jail in the future? Right? I'm not going to go to jail immediately upon breaking the law, but at some point in the future, if I get caught, I might very well. So that would be a future punishment.
I think that's not exactly what they're talking about, but yeah, I see your point.
Not. Yeah.
So why did Pody only want to take that one out? Did he say?
Well, because he's Christian.
Oh, yeah. He was. I was trying to lead you in. He was asked why the resolution removes only the ban on ministers, and his response was, I quote, "One simple step at a time."
Oh, well.
So just, get the ministers. If that works, then maybe we can bring the atheists on board.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'll believe it when I see it. Sure.
Yeah.
What's interesting, it bothered. Well, I'm bothered by 2 separate things. What's interesting is first, just holding on to the ideal that this nation was born out of a Christian faith or religion, when that's not necessarily the case. And I know, Autumn, you did a little bit of homework in regards to Andrew's book. Something I have. I freaking should have had it right next to me, because I physically have the book and I've read it cover to cover. It's brilliant. But just his perspective and the heavy research that he did in building up to writing this book of his. I wonder if you can give a little a taste of it.
Oh,
yeah. So he. What?
No, go ahead.
Did somebody say something? Oh, okay. Yes, he's a constitutional and civil rights attorney, activist, and former Grand Can tour guide. He has a BS in neuroscience and a few law degrees. And I'm. What was your question? I'm so sorry. I'm a little.
Jena,
lost.
I think I had asked Autumn if she had looked at his Twitter feed, not actually his book.
Oh, sure. Yes. No, I had a sneak peek at her notes. It was just she made a quote from the book. So, but yes, by all means.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you want me to read the quote?
Yes.
Yeah. So it says, America will never be a Christian nation, because the moment it becomes a Christian nation, it will cease to be America.
Right. And just from that statement alone, it just seems profound. And just based on the research that he did, and I think most of us can agree that it was never found as a Christian nation. And the more that we allow, and my other kind of itch to second to the first thing is, they keep this ideal that we are founded on a Christian religion. And by doing so and allowing individual states to kind of just do what they want at will, when they're not abiding by the federal U.S. Constitution, they continue to allow or give allowances to religious leaders to hold office and make their own discretionary laws based on their faith. And so if we continue to allow that, it just poses as a continuation of making that thin line of, the separation between church and state more and more thin as we continue.
Yeah, and at some point we will stop being a nation of a secular nation, and a nation of freedom, and become another Iran, or another, pick Saudi Arabia, pick any Middle Eastern country you want that is heavily religious and uses religious law as, a religious book as their legal code. We won't be any different than them. And that's not America, right? We are a secular nation. Freedom from religion was important to the founding fathers because they looked at all the problems it caused and realized, and all the different Christian religions and religions that had already come to our shores. Which one is right, and how do you figure that out? And the best thing to do is to not let any of them. I mean, what if, there are some pretty laid back Christian denominations, and then you have Westboro Baptist Church. So which one is right? Which one do you want governing your laws? How about none of them? Laws based on, rational reasons, and not because they happen to be in a book. But yeah.
Right. And like atheists and non-believers are discriminated against now. So just imagine what it would be like in a theocracy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It'd be
Right.
much
Exactly.
worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I think like you have here, April. There's one more quote from Andrew. There's no freedom of a religion without a government that is free from religion. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
Well, that seems like we've hit that one out of the park. So the other, so there's again, there's 7 other states, or 7 total states, that have laws on their books that do not allow atheists or non-believers to hold public office. Those being Maryland, Arkansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and anyone want to guess? Texas.
Oh, Texas.
Oh, Texas.
I want to mention something too, in addition to this. It was, just the blatant continuation of the dehumanization of being atheists, or atheists in general. A lovely quote I happened to find off of a person that I follow. It's, interestingly enough, it's a quote by Dr. Madeline Murray O'Hare. And so I'll just go ahead and read a snippet of it. You outlawed them from universities or any teaching careers, besmirched their reputations, banned or burned their books or their writings of any kind, humiliated them, seized their properties, arrested them for blasphemy. You dehumanized them with beatings and exquisite torture, and you have the nerve to complain to me that I laugh at you. And I thought that quote from Ms. O'Hare was just profound, just because it's just lays it plain, the continuation of treating non-believers as if we don't have morals, as if we are just baby eating, blah, 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 devil worshiping when we don't even believe in the devil either. So it's just ironic, but it's just continued scrutiny of thinking that just because we're not following the Christian faith, and I stress the Christian faith because there's other many religions in this country. And it's just, they're hard hit on the Christianity part. It's unfortunate that we have to constrain ourselves and continue to live under that. And so I hope that we do get to a point where we make a bigger push and have a broad supporters to effectively push against these hard-hitting Christian ideologies and lawmakers, and to effectively normalize atheism and atheists in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think this is par for the course. I mean, these trying to pass these laws at the state level. This one, somewhat benign. I would say I agree that if you make it what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. So, taking that section 2 out about the non-believers is definitely justified, and I hope that there can be a change to that law before it actually gets signed. But that being said, I had one more thing I was going to something you had said that brought me up, but it's gone.
Oh, if I can only jog your memory, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I mean that is I see it as part of the Christian Blitz. All of these different laws that are being put together at the state level, so they can, even though they are unconstitutional, so they can be put in front of a judge who might find them, might be what's the word?
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic. Thank you to that thought, and so work its way up through the courts. And so, yes, we need to continue to be vigilant. And I thank Andrew and the Freedom from Religion Foundation for keeping an eye on everything and doing the good work that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have our last segment here. This one is actually going to be a looking back.
Looking back.
So Jena, can you help us out with this looking back episode?
Absolutely. So in this looking back, it is a couple days ago, before us recording this on a Wednesday, was indeed the anniversary of a court case known as the Lemon versus Kurtzman. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right, in which this court case involved basically the state of Pennsylvania was enacting or were striving to provide funding to Catholic schools that doubled to both teach religious texts and also to teach secular texts as well. And if they did so, that their funding would come straight from that state government, because they are not only teaching religion, but they're making it so to expand and involve secular texts to that, but of course laced with, their faith, more or less. And so a particular individual by the name of Alton Lemon was posed to speak on behalf of the against, as far as trying to denounce this type of action from the state to take place. And so from that ruling, they deemed the ruling was favoring the state, or the ruling was having the state favor the religion as far as, or the faith of the school as far as providing that extra funding, just because they were involving secular texts. And from that developed what is known as the Lemon test, of course, coined from the gentleman's last name. So the Lemon test references a 3-prong type of breakdown of basically dialing back to the First Amendment and what is referenced and what we may be familiar with as the Establishment Clause, in which we discern, or the court discerns, I should say, whether or not a particular government or public official, state government or institution is trying to supplement or support a religious institution. And obviously, clearly in the Establishment Clause, there should be that separation of church and state. So they utilize the creation of the Lemon test to find that discernment. And if you allow me, I'll kind of break down to what that 3-prong breakdown is. So The first is known as the purpose prong. And that pretty much states that the court is trying to determine if the purpose of the need of the funding for such and such program of that religious organization is solely based out of there actually being a need and not necessarily them actively wanting to give out of their, own pocket just because they recognize that faith or they're trying to prop up that faith. So basically, it's the court initially recognizing what that purpose is for the state to do such a thing for this religious organization. The second prong, noted as the effect prong, basically that is saying, will funding for said program advance that religion or their message or movement if they were to apply that funding to that religious organization? And the final prong, known as the entanglement. Basically, this is assuming this aid or funding is continuous and will it create a level of entanglement or favoritism to that religion. So it's based on the purpose of the court to determine how on this system, if they can rule for and against said public organization to support this religious organization. But it has been made clear through various other court cases that this more or less has been ineffective solely because it depends on the actual, chief judge or judge in general, if they pose a risk as being more lenient and in favor of, the religion over the latter. So obviously it's up to that individual's interpretation of the law.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's always true of almost any law, but this one is particularly scary to have that applied to.
Right.
The Establishment Clause is definitely something that has been in the courts of late. As early as close as 2019, this lemon test was put to the test again. No, Autumn, you had something that you were going to add? I thought we had started talking about the same time. Okay. Yeah, so what I had found is that so there's in Maryland, what coincidence, there's the Brandenburg Cross. And the Brandenburg Cross, it's kind of important that it was built between 1918, 1925. And so it was built by the American Legion. And then for about 100 years or so, a little bit less, it was maintained by the American Legion. Now, unfortunately, in 1961, the property and the cross was bought up by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. This is part of the state government. The commission spent $117,000 to maintain and repair the cross. And then since getting it in 1961, and then 2008, they were going to set aside another $100,000 for renovations. Well, this did not go over well with some of the local atheists, and so it went into the courts, and actually the courts found that the cross was not a religious symbol. It was a symbol of peace for the veterans of World War I. That's why I had to get the dates in there. Because it was built by the American Legion. That's how they get the Army involved with it. Even though when you look back to the records, the newspapers of the time, when they talk about this cross, it is talked about in Christian language. They said that the cross had secular purpose. So 2 or 3 prongs. The cross had a secular purpose. It neither advanced nor inhibited the religion, and it did not have a primary effect of endorsing religion. So that is how that cross now is standing and being paid for. It's a 40-foot cross right by the water. It's really nice.
I'm sure. Yeah, I don't
but,
recall the army having the cross as a symbol on their uniform or anywhere.
yeah. So I mean, at first so I think that was in 2008 that it first went to the courts. It was they lost. They took it to the courts again. They won. It went to the Supreme Court in 2019. They lost, or we
Mm,
lost, I should say, as
mm.
atheists. Real fun times. So this
Yeah.
establishment clause. So what you're saying about the lemon test and the establishment clause being under fire, I can see it happening.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Even with, oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just agreeing with Malty.
No, I thought about this also just in what are today's standing chief justices, because a lot of them obviously just the recent 3 were voted in by the former president, so it's obvious that their ideologies or their interpretations may lean more on the right and thus may also lean more on faith. A lot of them, or well, Kavanaugh in particular, and I believe Gorsuch as well, made comments regarding the lemon test that I kind of dug up a little bit, stating it's something that's not very useful anymore. It's something that's old and should be thrown out or updated. Clarence added his tidbit too, not a big surprise, but it's even more interesting was something at the bottom of this article that we're referencing in regards to the actual name of the said person that is named after, Alton Lemon. It was, of course, unfortunately, he has been passed since 2013. But he made a statement as in reference to an interview back in 2003. And he says, "At this point in my life, I seriously wonder why we have religion, and I am not sure it does more good than harm. And I think that the battle for church-state separation has to be a continuing fight." And obviously so. Since that interview in 2003, and now we're in 2021, it is definitely a continuing fight, probably even more so in recent years.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's just such I mean, you are advancing the religion by promoting religious materials. So I disagree with them on that second step, but I can also see the other side. This is also a memorial. And at what point does a memorial become more about the memorial than memorializing the dead and religious, over time and things like that. So I don't know that that's an easy decision because it was put up by a secular organization to commemorate the dead, and it just happens to be a religious symbol. So I can see the other side of that on this particular case. I don't, but again, you're promoting via symbology a particular religion and a whole group of denominations. So, but this is unfortunate that we have to spend public money on a religious symbol.
Well, if we're spending money on a religious symbol, but it's a symbol for all of us, then it's not about the religion, it's about peace. This is a peace cross. So enter the Satanic Temple.
Oh no.
Yeah.
This ought to be fun.
So get your calendar out and mark it down 5 p.m. Eastern time on this upcoming 10th of July. The Satanic Temple is going to be having a ceremony to take over the Blandenberg Satanic Peace Cross to honor and to ritualize an honor of satanic veterans. So again, 5 p.m., July 10th, Satanic Temple will be taking the Blandenberg Peace Cross and renaming it the Blandenberg Satanic Peace Cross. The reason they say they're going to do it is, this is from them. the Satanic Temple is hosting a celebration of the first satanic monument on public property. The Supreme Court ruled that the Peace Cross does not violate the First Amendment because it honors all veterans and their sacrifices. Ipso facto, this includes veterans who are members of the Satanic Temple.
Hmm.
I love
So
those guys. They're so much fun.
That's brilliant.
they're doing good work.
Oh yeah.
So I'll be looking forward to updating you all on how that goes.
I'm sure that there will be great joy and happiness over it being a truly secular symbol once they get through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Much angst and gnashing of teeth, I'm sure.
So yeah, and I got that tidbit from the friendly atheists at Patheos. I just wanted to give a shout out to them.
Yeah.
Well,
Notes and links to all of the things that we are discussing, all the things we're pulling from, will be in the notes, in the show notes below. Please do not take our word for it. Check our sources. Don't believe us. Use your use your skills, and make sure that we haven't made mistakes, because we're human too. Anyone else have anything about the lemon test, the Blandenberg Peace Cross, or any other silliness with the STS?
I do want to note and give some, honor and commemoration to the person that it was named after, Alton Lemon. He dedicated his life a lot to the pursuit of ethical humanism, and as such, he recognized himself as an ethical humanist. He was an African American man who, as I mentioned, has since passed. He held membership at the American Civil Liberties Union, or as we know as the ACLU, and also was active in the NAACP. He was actually recognized as the first African American to be president of the Ethical Humanist Society of Philadelphia. So it doesn't go beside me as to why he was asked to be a representation to defeat what, at that time, back in 1971, what the state of Pennsylvania was trying to enact as far as funding this Catholic school. So just given his strife and, obviously recognizing that he necessarily himself didn't feel that this would be the end all be all as far as, this type of test to break down the establishment clause whenever judges are met with such and such decision. But it's definitely a stepping stone. There has been cases since the Lemon versus Kurtzman that have, some have won, some have lost, and, in favor or disfavor to wherever side that you find yourself on. But I think it definitely wanted to show some gratitude toward the man behind the name.
Rightly so. Rightly so.
Okay.
So what do we do today? We talked about guns, church, Reverend Moon, King Moon. And
King Moon.
and how fascist rhetoric is a very scary thing and very real for us currently.
Mm-hmm.
Unearthing grim truth about Canadian residential schools. Yeah, more things. We're looking at the past, and I'm glad we are looking at the past, since hopefully we can reconcile, and some of these wrongs definitely need to see the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Seidel is doing great jobs at the FFRF, and unfortunately, we have states like Tennessee that, well, I shouldn't say things like that. Hopefully, we can get atheists on the books there as well. And the Lemon Test, the Satanic Temple, the Brandenburg Cross. Mr. Lemon was greatly appreciated for his work in trying to separate church and state. So, Autumn, any thoughts as we wrap this up?
Thank you guys so much for having me on. This was really fun.
Appreciate you having you. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right, and with that, I guess I am going to thank Jim, Jena, Autumn for being here and looking and digging into these difficult subjects with me. As always, thank you all for watching or listening. Like and subscribe, as said before, and we will see you on the flip side. Bye, all.